In a small, dimly lit gym tucked away in an industrial part of town, a young woman walked through the door for her very first mixed martial arts, MMA, class. Her name was Maya, and she wasn't your typical fighter. At 28 years old, she had spent most of her life running on tracks, not trading punches or grappling on mats. She wasn't built like the muscular fighters you see in magazines. Instead, she carried herself with quiet confidence, though her heart raced as soon as she stepped inside. The gym smelled of sweat and leather, a mix that told stories of countless battles fought within its walls. Heavy bags swung back and forth as people practiced their kicks and punches. In one corner, two men wrestled on the mat, grunting loudly with every move they made. It felt raw, real, and slightly intimidating, but also exciting. For Maya, this place represented something bigger than just learning how to fight. It was about proving to herself that she could step out of her comfort zone and take control of her life. As soon as Maya entered the room, all eyes turned toward her. Not because she looked extraordinary, but because she stood out in ways she couldn't ignore. Most of the people training there were men, many of whom seemed skeptical when they saw her. A few whispered among themselves, while others let their smirks do the talking. One guy, loud and obnoxious, didn't even bother hiding his disdain. "This ain't no place for someone like her," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His words hung heavy in the air, but Maya refused to let them weigh her down. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and approached the instructor. He was a middle-aged man with tattoos covering both arms and a calm demeanor that put her at ease. Introducing herself, Maya explained why she wanted to join the class. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She admitted she had zero experience in fighting, but emphasized her determination to learn. The instructor nodded thoughtfully, sizing her up before finally saying, "All right, let's see what you've got." What followed next was nothing short of overwhelming. The warm-up alone left Maya gasping for air. Jumping jacks, push-ups, squats, it all came fast and furious, leaving little time to catch her breath. As she struggled to keep up, she noticed some of the regulars exchanging knowing glances. They weren't outright laughing at her, but the judgment was clear. Even during basic drills like practicing jabs and hooks on pads held by partners, Maya found herself fumbling. Her movements lacked precision and her punches barely registered against the thick padding. Then came sparring, the moment she'd been dreading since walking into the gym. Sparring meant facing off against another person, testing your skills, in a controlled yet intense environment. When it was Maya's turn, her opponent happened to be none other than the same loud-mouthed guy who'd mocked her earlier. Standing across from him, Maya felt her nerves kick into overdrive. He towered over her, his muscles bulging beneath his shirt, and wore a smirk that screamed arrogance. The instructor gave them the signal to start, and almost immediately, Maya realized how outmatched she was. The guy wasted no time charging at her, grabbing her arms and pinning her to the mat with ease. Lying there, staring up at the ceiling, Maya felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. But worse than that was the sound of his voice cutting through the hum of activity around them. "Stick to running laps, sweetheart," he sneered, loud enough for nearby fighters to chuckle. For a brief second, Maya considered walking away. Maybe this wasn't for her after all. Maybe these people were right. Maybe she didn't belong here. But then something shifted inside her. Instead of letting the comment crush her spirit, she used it to fuel her fire. Climbing back to her feet, she dusted herself off and returned to the line of students waiting for their next turn. She knew she wouldn't master MMA overnight, but she promised herself one thing. She would never give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her quit. Over the following weeks, Maya threw herself into training with everything she had. Between classes, she studied videos online, watching professional fighters break down techniques and strategies. Late at night, when the rest of the world slept, she practiced footwork drills in her living room, perfecting the art of moving quickly without losing balance. Whenever possible, she asked more experienced fighters at the gym for advice, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Slowly but surely, tiny improvements began to show. Her punches became sharper, landing with more force than before. Her defense tightened, making it harder for opponents to land clean hits. And though she still struggled during sparring sessions, she no longer froze under pressure. Each session taught her something new, not just about fighting, but about herself. She discovered reserves of strength she didn't know existed, along with a stubborn streak that refused to back down, no matter how tough things got. Despite her progress, not everyone at the gym warmed up to her presence. Some continued to underestimate her abilities, dismissing her efforts as mere flukes. Others simply ignored her altogether, treating her as if she were invisible. But Maya didn't care. She reminded herself daily why she started this journey: to prove to herself that she could rise above doubt, fear, and prejudice. Little did she know her greatest test and triumph was just around the corner. Maya's journey in the gym was far from smooth. Every day felt like a battle, not just against her opponents on the mat, but against the doubts that lingered both inside and outside her mind. The early days were especially tough. She would show up to class exhausted from work, still determined to give it her all, only to find herself struggling to keep up with even the simplest drills. While seasoned fighters moved with ease, their punches sharp and their footwork precise, Maya often tripped over her own feet or missed her mark entirely. During warm-ups, she quickly learned that conditioning was going to be one of her biggest challenges. Push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, everything left her gasping for air while others barely broke a sweat. Some of the fighters exchanged glances when they saw her struggling, and though no one said anything outright, the looks spoke volumes. It wasn't uncommon for her to overhear snickers or muffled comments about how this isn't her scene. But what hurt the most wasn't the laughter. It was the dismissive tone, as if everyone already knew she wouldn't last. When sparring sessions rolled around, things got worse. In theory, sparring was supposed to help fighters practice their skills in a controlled environment. For Maya, however, it felt more like being thrown into the deep end without knowing how to swim. Her first few matches were brutal. Opponents underestimated her at first, thinking she'd be an easy win, but once they realized she wasn't backing down, frustration set in. They came at her harder, faster, trying to end the round quickly so they could move on to someone worth their time. One particular session stands out in her memory. It was her third week at the gym, and she was paired with a guy who had been training for years. He wasn't particularly tall or muscular, but his technique was flawless. From the moment the instructor signaled the start of the match, he dominated. Within seconds, he closed the distance between them, grabbed her arm, and twisted her into a submission hold. Maya tapped out almost immediately, feeling embarrassed and defeated as she lay there catching her breath. "See, told you this ain't your thing." The loud-mouthed fighter who'd mocked her before chimed in again. This time, his words stung deeper than ever. She wanted to snap back, to tell him exactly where he could shove his opinions, but instead, she bit her tongue and stood up. Walking back to the line of students waiting for their turn, she reminded herself why she was here: to prove something to herself, not to anyone else. Still, the sting of failure lingered long after the session ended. But Maya wasn't one to stay down for long. If anything, every insult and every loss pushed her harder. After each class, she went home and studied videos of professional fighters online. She watched how they moved, how they anticipated their opponent's actions, and how they adapted mid-fight. She paid close attention to details: how their weight shifted during kicks, how their hands stayed up to protect their face, how small adjustments could make a big difference in defense. These late-night study sessions became her secret weapon. In addition to watching videos, Maya practiced relentlessly. Late at night, when her apartment grew quiet and the rest of the world seemed asleep, she worked on her footwork in the narrow space between her couch and coffee table. She practiced pivoting, shuffling, and sidestepping until her legs burned. Sometimes she'd punch the air in front of the mirror, analyzing her form and tweaking it until it felt right. On weekends, she'd visit nearby parks and jog laps, focusing on endurance so she wouldn't tire out too quickly during training. Her dedication didn't go completely unnoticed. A few of the more experienced fighters at the gym began taking notice of her improvement. One older man who rarely spoke unless spoken to pulled her aside one evening after class. "You're getting better," he said simply, nodding toward the mat where she'd just finished practicing takedowns. "Keep working on your base, balance is key." Though his praise was brief, it meant the world to Maya. For the first time since starting her journey, someone acknowledged her effort and encouraged her to keep going. Still, not everyone shared his sentiment. That loud-mouthed fighter continued to mock her openly, often making snide remarks whenever she stumbled or lost a sparring match. Other members of the gym joined in occasionally, laughing along as if it were all some big joke. Maya tried not to let it get to her, but there were moments when the negativity wore her down. There were nights when she questioned whether all the hard work was worth it, if she'd ever truly belong in a place where so many people seemed determined to push her out. Yet through it all, Maya refused to quit. Every insult, every failed attempt, every painful fall, she turned them into fuel for her fire. Instead of letting the criticism break her, she used it to sharpen her focus. She started arriving at the gym earlier than anyone else, using the extra time to stretch and prepare mentally for the day ahead. She asked questions during classes, seeking advice from instructors and fellow fighters alike. Slowly but surely, her confidence began to grow. By the 6th month of training, the changes in Maya were undeniable. Her once hesitant movements had transformed into fluid, calculated steps. Her punches carried more power, her defenses tighter. Even her posture exuded a newfound sense of assurance. During sparring sessions, opponents no longer dismissed her as an easy target. They approached her cautiously, realizing that she wasn't the same person who'd walked into the gym 6 months ago unsure of herself. Despite her progress, skepticism remained. Some gym members still doubted whether she'd ever amount to anything in such a competitive sport dominated by men. Others acted indifferent, treating her like she was invisible. And then there was the loud-mouthed fighter, whose constant jabs never seemed to stop. "You'll never stand a chance against real competition," he sneered one evening after watching her spar. His words hung in the air, heavy with mockery. But Maya didn't respond. Instead, she smiled faintly, knowing something he didn't. Deep down, she knew she was ready, not just to hold her ground, but to prove herself in ways none of them expected. What happened next would silence the doubters, change perceptions, and solidify her place in the gym forever. But that story belongs to another chapter of her journey. For now, Maya kept her head high, focused on the path ahead, and prepared to face whatever challenges came her way. 6 months had passed since Maya first stepped into the gym, and the transformation in her was undeniable. What started as a shaky, uncertain journey had evolved into something far greater than she, or anyone else, had anticipated. Her body told the story of countless hours spent pushing herself to the limit. Lean muscles replaced softness, calluses formed on her knuckles, and bruises became temporary badges of honor. But it wasn't just her physical appearance that changed. Her mindset shifted too. She carried herself differently now, with a quiet confidence that spoke louder than any boastful words ever could. Still, not everyone at the gym was ready to acknowledge her growth. The loud-mouthed fighter who'd mocked her from day one continued to treat her like an outsider. He rolled his eyes whenever she landed a clean punch during drills, or held her ground in sparring matches. Others followed suit, dismissing her progress as luck or coincidence. "She's just getting lucky," he muttered one evening after watching her execute a flawless takedown. His tone dripped with disbelief, but Maya didn't let it faze her. She'd learned early on that proving people wrong wasn't about arguing. It was about showing up again and again until the evidence spoke for itself. Then came the news that sent ripples through the gym. A local pro fighter was coming in for open mat practice. Word spread quickly among the members, each eager to test their skills against someone with real-world experience. This wasn't just any pro fighter. It was Ryan, a regional legend known for his brute strength and submission prowess. Fighters whispered excitedly about the chance to spar with him, imagining how they'd fare against such a formidable opponent. Even the loud-mouthed guy couldn't contain his enthusiasm, bragging loudly about how he'd take Ryan down within seconds. For Maya, however, the announcement sparked something deeper, a mix of excitement and nerves. On one hand, this was an opportunity to measure her progress against someone at the top of the game. On the other hand, she knew exactly what people expected: failure. They assumed she'd crumble under pressure, just like they thought she would when she first walked into the gym. But Maya saw things differently. To her, this wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving something to herself. If she could hold her own against Ryan even for a few moments, it would validate everything she'd worked so hard for over the past 6 months. When the day finally arrived, anticipation buzzed in the air. The gym felt fuller than usual, packed, with fighters jockeying for position near the mat where Ryan would be practicing. When he walked in, the room fell silent for a brief moment. Standing well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and arms thick as tree trunks, Ryan commanded attention without saying a word. His reputation preceded him, and his presence alone was enough to make most people nervous. As he stretched and warmed up, groups of fighters gathered around, volunteering eagerly for sparring rounds. Maya stood quietly off to the side, observing the scene unfold. She watched as Ryan paired off with his first opponent, a muscular man who charged at him aggressively but ended up flat on his back within seconds. The crowd erupted in cheers, clapping and hollering as Ryan helped his opponent up with a grin. Round after round followed, each ending the same way, Ryan dominating effortlessly, his technique sharp and unrelenting. By the time the fourth match concluded, the mood in the gym shifted slightly. Excitement gave way to awe, and maybe even a hint of fear, as fighters realized just how skilled Ryan truly was. That's when Maya made her move. Stepping forward, she raised her hand timidly and asked if she could have a turn. The request drew immediate reactions from those nearby. Some laughed nervously, others exchanged skeptical glances. Even Ryan paused, looking at her with mild surprise before nodding politely. "Sure thing," he said, gesturing for her to step onto the mat. The loud-mouthed fighter standing nearby couldn't resist chiming in. "This should be good," he snickered, earning a few chuckles from his friends. Maya ignored him, focusing instead on the task ahead. She took a deep breath, adjusted her gloves, and stepped onto the mat opposite Ryan. The contrast between them was stark. He towered over her, his frame solid and imposing, while she appeared small and slight by comparison. Yet despite the size difference, there was no mistaking the determination in her eyes. As the instructor signaled the start of the round, the gym grew eerily quiet. Everyone leaned in, curious to see how this unlikely matchup would play out. Ryan wasted no time closing the distance, moving forward with purpose. But instead of panicking, Maya stayed calm. She remembered all the late nights spent studying techniques, all the hours practicing footwork, and every lesson she'd absorbed from instructors and videos. This was her moment to put it all together. Ryan lunged for a clinch, attempting to overpower her with sheer force. But Maya sidestepped smoothly, using her agility to evade his grasp. Before he could recover, she countered with a perfectly timed sweep, sending him crashing to the ground. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Ryan landed hard on the mat. For a split second, he looked stunned, but only for a moment. Reacting quickly, he tried to roll away, but Maya transitioned seamlessly into a triangle choke, locking her legs tightly around his neck. Time seemed to stand still as the gym collectively held its breath. Ryan tapped out almost instantly, raising his hand to signal surrender. 15 seconds. That's all it took. 15 seconds to silence every doubter, shatter every stereotype, and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Maya belonged in that gym just as much as anyone else. For a moment, nobody moved. Fighters stared in disbelief, some shaking their heads in amazement. Then slowly applause broke out. It started with a few hesitant claps, then grew louder and more enthusiastic as the reality of what had just happened sank in. Ryan climbed to his feet, patting Maya on the back with genuine admiration. "Damn," he said with a laugh. "You've got skills." The praise might have gone to someone else's head, but Maya remained grounded. She nodded respectfully, thanking Ryan for the opportunity to spar. Off to the side, the loudmouth fighter looked visibly embarrassed, his earlier smugness replaced by shame. Other gym members approached her, offering congratulations and apologies for underestimating her. For the first time since she joined the gym, Maya felt truly accepted, not because she won, but because she earned their respect. Word of her victory spread quickly beyond the gym walls. Local media outlets caught wind of the story, highlighting how a woman once dismissed as an outsider had humbled a seasoned pro in mere seconds. Overnight, Maya went from being the target of ridicule to a symbol of perseverance and skill. Invitations to compete professionally started rolling in, though she remained cautious, wanting to ensure she was truly ready before stepping into the cage. Looking back on that day, Maya realized it wasn't just about winning a sparring match, it was about breaking barriers. She proved to herself that she could rise above doubt and adversity, no matter how stacked the odds seemed. And in doing so, she inspired others to believe in their own potential, reminding them that true strength lies not in avoiding challenges, but in facing them head-on. The moment Ryan tapped out, the gym froze. It wasn't just silence, it was disbelief wrapped in awe. For 15 seconds, Maya had done what many thought impossible. She'd taken down a pro fighter known for his strength and skill, someone who had dominated every opponent before her. Fighters who had been cheering moments earlier now stood still, their jaws slack, eyes wide. Even Ryan, sprawled on the mat with his hand up signaling surrender, looked momentarily stunned. Maya didn't celebrate wildly or throw her fists into the air. Instead, she calmly released her grip, unwrapping her legs from around Ryan's neck as he climbed to his feet. When she stood up, brushing herself off, Ryan extended a hand toward her. "Damn," he said with a laugh, shaking his head. "You've got some serious skills." There was no bitterness in his voice, just respect. He patted her on the back, genuinely impressed by how quickly and decisively she had taken control of the match. For a few seconds, the room remained eerily quiet. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd. At first, it was hesitant, a few scattered claps, but soon it grew louder, more enthusiastic. People were clapping not just because they'd witnessed something incredible, but because they realized they'd underestimated Maya. Some fighters exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from surprise to admiration. Others nodded approvingly, finally acknowledging that she belonged in the gym just as much as anyone else. But perhaps the most telling reaction came from the loudmouthed fighter who'd mocked her relentlessly since day one. He stood near the edge of the mat, frozen in place, his face flushed red with embarrassment. Earlier he'd boasted about how easily he'd handle Ryan, yet here was Maya, a woman he'd dismissed time and again, doing what none of them had managed to do. His friends nudged him awkwardly, trying to lighten the mood, but he couldn't meet Maya's gaze. Instead, he muttered something under his breath and slunk away, clearly humiliated. As the applause continued, Maya felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Pride, relief, vindication. They all mingled together, making her chest tighten slightly. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about breaking barriers. She hadn't walked into the gym 6 months ago expecting to become some kind of hero, but now she understood the weight of what she'd accomplished. Her victory wasn't just personal. It represented hope for others like her, people who might have felt out of place or doubted their ability to succeed in spaces dominated by men. After the initial shock wore off, fighters began approaching Maya one by one. Some offered congratulations, patting her on the shoulder or giving her a fist bump. Others apologized for doubting her, admitting they'd underestimated her strength and determination. One older man, who rarely spoke during classes, pulled her aside and said simply, "You earned this." His words carried a depth that resonated with her. He didn't need to elaborate because she knew exactly what he meant. Word of Maya's performance spread quickly beyond the walls of the gym. By the next morning, social media feeds lit up with posts about the black woman who submitted a pro fighter in 15 seconds. Local news outlets picked up the story, interviewing members of the gym and sharing clips of the sparring session, with permission. The narrative focused not only on her technical skill, but also on her journey, the ridicule she faced, the hard work she put in, and the resilience she showed when everyone counted her out. Overnight, Maya became an inspiration to countless people who saw themselves in her struggle. Invitations poured in almost immediately. Amateur MMA tournaments reached out, asking if she'd consider competing professionally. Promoters promised her a platform to showcase her talents, while coaches offered free training sessions to help her refine her skills further. But Maya didn't rush into anything. Despite the sudden attention, she remained grounded, remembering why she started this journey in the first place. This wasn't about fame or glory. It was about growth, self-discovery, and proving to herself that she could overcome any obstacle. She spent the following weeks weighing her options carefully. Training for competition was a different beast altogether, requiring not just physical preparation but mental fortitude as well. While Maya felt confident in her abilities, she knew stepping into the cage meant facing opponents who would come at her with everything they had. She wanted to make sure she was ready, not just to fight but to win. During this time, something remarkable happened within the gym itself. The dynamic shifted noticeably. Fighters who once treated Maya as an outsider now sought her advice during drills, asking for tips on technique or strategy. Younger members, especially women, looked up to her as a role model, often lingering after class to ask questions about her journey. Even the instructors began incorporating elements of her fighting style into their lessons, pointing out how her agility and precision set her apart. Maya embraced her newfound role, using it as an opportunity to inspire others. She encouraged those who doubted themselves, reminding them that progress takes time and effort. "Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong," she told a group of newcomers one evening. "If I can do this, so can you. Just keep showing up even when it feels impossible." Her impact extended beyond the gym, too. Women from all walks of life reached out to her online, sharing stories of their own struggles and thanking her for being a beacon of hope. Some admitted they'd always wanted to try martial arts but were afraid of judgment or failure. Maya responded to each message personally, offering words of encouragement and urging them to take that first step. "It's scary at first," she wrote in one reply, "but trust me, the hardest part is walking through the door. Once you're in, you'll find your strength." Despite the spotlight, Maya stayed humble. She continued attending classes regularly, working harder than ever to improve her game. She knew that staying grounded was key. If she let success go to her head, she risked losing sight of what truly mattered: the love of the sport and the lessons it taught her about perseverance and resilience. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Maya sat alone on the mat, catching her breath. The gym was quiet now, the usual chaos replaced by stillness. As she stared at the worn surface beneath her, she reflected on how far she'd come. From the girl who once doubted whether she belonged in this world to the fighter who silenced critics in mere seconds, her journey had been anything but easy. But it was worth every drop of sweat, every bruise, every moment of doubt. Maya smiled to herself, knowing this was only the beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on. After all, she'd already proven that she could rise above anything life threw her way. And deep down, she knew the best was yet to come. A year had passed since that unforgettable day when Maya submitted Ryan, the pro fighter, in just 15 seconds. The gym where it all began was still her second home, but now she carried herself with an air of quiet authority. No longer was she the newcomer struggling to keep up. She'd become a cornerstone of the community, someone others looked to for guidance and inspiration. Yet despite the respect she'd earned, Maya knew her journey wasn't complete. She wanted more, not for fame or glory, but because she felt there was still so much left to learn and achieve. The decision to compete professionally didn't come lightly. For months, Maya wrestled with the idea, weighing the risks and rewards. Stepping into the cage meant facing opponents who trained their entire lives for this moment. It wasn't just about skill, it was about strategy, mental toughness, and the ability to adapt under pressure. While some encouraged her to take the leap, others warned her not to rush into something so demanding. But Maya trusted her instincts. If she could hold her own against Ryan after only 6 months of training, surely she could rise to the challenge of competitive fighting with the right preparation. She threw herself into training with renewed intensity. Her daily routine became a blur of drills, sparring sessions, and conditioning exercises designed to push her body to its limits. Early mornings were spent perfecting footwork and practicing combinations on heavy bags until her arms burned. Afternoons focused on grappling techniques, working with partners to refine submissions and escapes. Evenings often involved endurance runs through the city streets, her breath syncing with the rhythm of her pounding feet as she visualized her upcoming fights. What set Maya apart during this phase wasn't just her work ethic, it was her mindset. She approached every session with purpose, treating each drill as if it were part of a real match. When instructors critiqued her form or pointed out weaknesses, she didn't get defensive. Instead, she listened intently, absorbing feedback like a sponge. "You're ready," one coach told her after a particularly grueling sparring session. "But remember, fighting isn't just physical, it's mental. Stay calm, stay sharp." Her first amateur tournament arrived sooner than expected. On the day of the event, nerves buzzed beneath her skin like live wires. Backstage, surrounded by other fighters pacing anxiously or stretching silently, Maya tried to steady her breathing. She reminded herself why she was here. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to test her own limits. Still, the weight of expectations lingered. Friends from the gym, family members, and even strangers who followed her story online had high hopes for her. She didn't want to let them down. When her name was called over the loudspeaker, Maya walked toward the cage with measured steps. The crowd erupted into cheers, their energy electric. As she climbed through the ropes and stood in the center of the octagon, she took a moment to soak it all in. Bright lights illuminated the arena, casting long shadows across the canvas. Opposite her stood her opponent, a wiry woman with quick hands and a reputation for relentless aggression. They touched gloves briefly before retreating to their corners, waiting for the referee's signal to begin. The bell rang, and the fight started with a flurry of movement. Her opponent came out swinging, throwing rapid punches aimed at overwhelming Maya early, but Maya stayed composed, slipping past most of the strikes and countering with calculated jabs. Each punch landed cleanly, forcing her opponent to adjust her approach. When the action shifted to clinching range, Maya used her superior balance to maintain control, steering her opponent toward the cage wall. Midway through the round, things escalated quickly. Her opponent attempted a takedown, driving forward, with surprising force. For a split second, Maya stumbled, but instead of panicking, she turned the momentum to her advantage. Using a textbook sweep, she flipped her opponent onto the mat and transitioned smoothly into side control. From there, she rained down precise elbows, careful not to leave openings for escape. The referee stepped in moments later, signaling the end of the match, a unanimous victory for Maya. As the crowd roared, Maya climbed to her feet, raising her hand in triumph. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not from pride, but from the realization of how far she'd come. This win wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who ever doubted themselves but found the courage to try anyway. Reporters swarmed her backstage afterward, eager to capture her thoughts on the victory. One question stood out among the rest. "How does it feel to silence your critics?" Maya paused, considering her response. Then with a faint smile, she said, "I didn't step into that cage to silence anyone. I did it to show myself, and maybe others like me, that we belong here, that no matter where you start or what people say, you can rise above it if you believe in yourself." Her words resonated deeply, echoing far beyond the confines of the arena. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting not just her technical prowess but also the message behind her journey. Social media exploded with messages of support, many from young women inspired by her perseverance. Parents shared photos of daughters wearing boxing gloves, saying they hope to follow in Maya's footsteps someday. Coaches reported seeing an uptick in female participants signing up for martial arts classes, citing her story as motivation. Back at the gym, life continued much as it always had, but with one key difference. Maya's presence carried even greater significance now. Fighters sought her advice not just on technique, but on navigating challenges both inside and outside the sport. Younger members, especially women, gravitated toward her, finding comfort in her relatable demeanor and unwavering encouragement. She made it a point to mentor them, sharing lessons learned along her own path. "Don't be afraid to fail. she told a group of newcomers one evening. Every mistake teaches you something valuable. Keep showing up and trust the process. Even the loudmouthed fighter who once mocked her had changed his tune. Gone were the snide remarks and condescending smirks. In their place was genuine respect, evident in the way he nodded approvingly during sparring sessions or offered constructive feedback after drills. Though they never spoke directly about the past, Maya noticed the shift in his behavior and appreciated it. Forgiveness, she believed, was as much a part of growth as resilience. Outside the gym, Maya used her growing platform to advocate for inclusivity in combat sports. She gave talks at local schools and community centers, emphasizing the importance of representation and self-belief. There will always be people who doubt you, she told audiences, but don't let their opinions define you. Focus on your goals. Surround yourself with people who lift you up and never stop pushing forward. Despite her achievements, Maya remained humble. Success hadn't changed her core values. If anything, it reinforced them. She continued attending classes regularly, working alongside newer members and reminding herself that learning never truly ends. Every session presented opportunities to grow, whether by mastering a new technique or helping someone else improve theirs. One evening, as she sat alone on the mat after a long day of training, Maya reflected on everything she'd accomplished. From the girl ridiculed for daring to enter a male-dominated space to the fighter celebrated for breaking barriers, her journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. Yet, she knew this chapter was merely the beginning. There were bigger challenges ahead, tougher opponents to face and higher goals to chase, and though uncertainty loomed, Maya welcomed it with open arms. Because deep down, she understood something fundamental. Strength isn't measured by victories alone. It's found in the willingness to keep moving forward, no matter what obstacles stand in your way. And Maya, she was just getting started. Maya's journey didn't stop with her first amateur victory. In fact, that win was just the spark that ignited a wildfire of determination within her. Over the next few months, she continued competing in local tournaments, steadily climbing the ranks and earning recognition as one of the most promising fighters in the region. Each match brought new challenges. Opponents who studied her style, crowds that grew larger, and stakes that felt heavier. But Maya faced them all with the same grit and focus that had carried her this far. Her fighting style evolved too. What started as raw instinct transformed into calculated precision. She learned to read her opponent's movements, anticipating their attacks before they even thought to throw them. Her footwork became sharper, allowing her to glide across the mat like water flowing effortlessly around obstacles. And while she always preferred submissions, the thrill of locking someone down until they tapped out, she also developed a knockout punch that left spectators gasping. People began calling her the Quiet Storm, a nickname that perfectly captured her demeanor. Calm on the surface but fierce underneath. But it wasn't just her skills that set Maya apart. It was her heart. Every time she stepped into the cage, she fought not just for herself but for everyone who ever doubted their ability to belong. Before each match, she'd take a moment to look around at the crowd, imagining all the people watching from home, or those who couldn't be there but supported her silently. "This is for you," she'd whisper under her breath, a quiet reminder of why she kept pushing forward. As her reputation grew, so did the opportunities. Promoters invited her to bigger events, offering better payouts and more exposure. One day, she received an email that made her pause. A top-tier regional promotion wanted her to compete in their championship series. It was a huge leap from the small-time tournaments she'd been participating in, and the thought of facing elite fighters intimidated her. But Maya had spent years proving to herself that fear was just another hurdle to overcome. So, with a deep breath and a nod to her coaches, she accepted. Preparing for the championship fight tested every ounce of her resolve. The training regimen intensified, leaving little room for anything else in her life. Mornings began at dawn with cardio drills designed to push her endurance beyond its limits. Afternoons were reserved for sparring sessions against seasoned veterans who mimicked the techniques of her upcoming opponent. Evenings often ended with video analysis, breaking down footage of past matches to identify patterns and weaknesses. Sleep came fitfully, her mind racing with strategies and scenarios. Yet, through it all, Maya found solace in the support system she'd built over the years. Her trainers, once skeptical of her potential, now stood firmly in her corner, fine-tuning every detail of her game. Fellow fighters at the gym rallied around her, cheering her on during practice and offering advice when needed. Friends and family filled her phone with messages of encouragement, reminding her how proud they were of everything she'd achieved. Knowing she wasn't alone gave her strength when doubt crept in. The night of the championship fight arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The arena was packed, fans filling every seat and lining the walls. Bright lights illuminated the cage, casting dramatic shadows across the canvas. As Maya walked toward the octagon, flanked by her coaches, the noise swelled into a deafening whir. Chants of her name echoed through the space, a surreal reminder of how far she'd come since those early days in the gym. Her opponent was formidable, a veteran fighter known for her brutal striking and relentless pace. Standing across from her in the center of the cage, Maya took a moment to study her rival. This wasn't just another match. It was a test of wills, a battle between two warriors determined to leave everything on the mat. When the referee signaled the start, both women exploded into action. The fight was intense from the opening bell. Her opponent came out swinging, landing powerful kicks and punches that forced Maya to stay on her toes. But Maya remained patient, using her agility to evade strikes and counter when openings appeared. By the second round, the tide began to shift. Sensing fatigue in her opponent's movements, Maya seized control, driving her rival against the cage wall and transitioning into a dominant grappling position. From there, she locked in a rear naked choke, squeezing tightly until her opponent tapped out. When the referee raised her hand in victory, Maya felt a rush of emotions, relief, joy, disbelief, all swirling together in a tidal wave of triumph. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged her coaches and looked out at the cheering crowd. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to bask in the glory of what she'd accomplished, but deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was simply another step on her journey. In the weeks that followed, Maya used her platform to inspire others. She visited schools, community centers, and gyms, sharing her story with anyone willing to listen. She spoke openly about the ridicule she faced, the doubts she battled, and the hard work it took to rise above it all. "You don't have to be perfect," she told audiences. "You just have to keep going no matter how hard things get." Her impact extended beyond words. Maya launched a program aimed at providing free martial arts training to underserved communities, particularly young women and girls. She believed strongly in the power of combat sports to build confidence, discipline, and resilience, and she wanted to make sure everyone had access to those benefits. Dozens of participants signed up, eager to learn from the woman who'd defied the odds. Back at the gym, life returned to its familiar rhythm, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Maya continued mentoring newcomers, helping them navigate the same struggles she once faced. She reminded them that progress isn't linear, that failure is part of growth, and that perseverance always pays off. Watching these fighters develop their skills gave her immense satisfaction, knowing she was passing on the lessons she'd learned along the way. One evening, as she sat alone on the mat after a long day of training, Maya reflected on her journey. From the girl ridiculed for daring to dream to the champion celebrated for breaking barriers, she'd come so far. Yet she knew there was still more work to do, more fights to win, more lives to touch, more dreams to chase. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly bring challenges, Maya welcomed them with open arms. Because deep down, she understood something fundamental. True strength isn't measured by victories alone. It's found in the courage to rise after every fall, to stand tall despite the weight of doubt, and to keep moving forward no matter what. Maya had proven time and again that she possessed that kind of strength, and she hoped her story would inspire others to find it within themselves too. And so, with a smile on her face and fire in her heart, Maya prepared for whatever came next. The world had seen what she could do, but she knew her legacy wasn't just about wins or titles. It was about showing people that they belonged, that they mattered, and that they could achieve greatness if they refused to give up.